So Donald Trump launched a direct, personal, and intensely aggressive public assault on Canada early this morning, unleashing a rapid sequence of social media strikes, followed by an impromptu, unscripted press interaction in which he branded Mark Carney as profoundly ungrateful, vowed the most severe economic sanctions ever contemplated against a nominal ally, and effectively dared Canada to mount any meaningful response. Mark Carney replied within hours, not with inflammatory language or mere verbal sparring, but with concrete, multi-layered action, a devastating three-part counteroffensive that combined a meticulous, fact-supported public refutation of every Trump accusation, swift and precisely targeted economic measures aimed directly at the political heartland of Trump's support base, and a tightly synchronized wave of endorsements from 5 major allied nations that materialized within 90 minutes of Carney's formal address. By the closing bell on Wall Street, financial markets had issued their unambiguous judgment. Carney emerged victorious, and the victory was not marginal, it was decisive. Yet the most important revelation from this episode extends well beyond the particular policies deployed or the immediate market reactions they provoked. The most important revelation centers on what this sharp exchange starkly illuminated about the fundamental differences between the two leaders. One side entered the fray relying on personal insults and emotional outbursts. The other side entered equipped with a thoroughly developed operational plan. One side depended on spontaneous, off-the-cuff remarks delivered during a brief media stop. The other side executed a pre-assembled, comprehensively prepared response framework that had been simulated in advance, aligned with international partners, and meticulously calibrated to generate maximum political disruption at the lowest possible domestic economic expense. This was never going to be a contest of equals. It pitted pure impulse against systematic preparation, and systematic preparation prevailed comprehensively and convincingly. Warren Buffett's later commentary on the day's events stands as perhaps the most piercing and incisive assessment of leadership effectiveness he has offered across the full span of this extended trade confrontation. His observations about the critical divide between leaders who react in the heat of the moment and leaders who anticipate and plan ahead, and the heavy toll a country pays when it consistently chooses the former, are observations every engaged voter should carefully consider. Subscribe now if you want to follow this story as it continues to reshape understanding of the larger conflict, because this single day has permanently altered how the entire trade dispute must be interpreted. Here is how the day unfolded in detail. I want to trace the timeline nearly hour by hour because the exact sequence and rhythm of events most clearly expose the profound asymmetry at work. At 6:30 a.m., a pre-recorded interview with Mark Carney began broadcasting on Canadian morning television, with key segments quickly picked up and rebroadcast by American networks within the hour. In the conversation, Carney spoke calmly and methodically, outlining the significant progress Canada has achieved in diversifying its trade relationships. He described newly secured bilateral agreements with the European Union and several Indo-Pacific partners, highlighted major energy export infrastructure projects now under construction directed toward both Atlantic and Pacific terminals, and explained how strengthened alliances have fundamentally re-engineered Canada's economic structure in less than 2 years. The presentation was restrained, anchored in concrete data, and deliberately understated. In normal circumstances, such an interview would likely receive only brief mention on U.S. business channels before disappearing from view. But one particular statement cut sharply through the measured tone. Carney declared, "Canada's economic future is no longer held hostage to the choices of any single trading partner. We have constructed a resilient, diversified, sovereign economy, and we accomplished it in under 2 years." The phrases "held hostage" and "any single trading partner" landed with unmistakable clarity. He had articulated the quiet but increasingly evident reality aloud. Canada no longer depends on the United States in the traditional sense. Donald Trump heard those words clearly. According to White House insiders, Trump was watching Fox Business in the residence when the segment aired. He reportedly turned to an aide and asked, "Did you hear what this guy just said about us?" The aide had not seen it. That made no difference. Trump had already reached for his phone. By 7:15 a.m., the first post appeared. 6 messages followed in 45 minutes. The opening one labeled Carney the most ungrateful leader of any nation and claimed Canada would be nothing without America. The second accused Canada of exploiting the United States for decades and said Carney was appearing on television to boast about it. The third promised the harshest economic measures ever imposed on a supposed ally. The final three turned sharply personal, attacking Carney's Goldman Sachs past, calling him a globalist, questioning his Canadian authenticity because of his Bank of England tenure, and asserting that Canada's economy survives only because America permits it. 6 posts, 45 minutes. Each angrier, each less coherent, each driving the president deeper into a self-created trap. Public threats require follow-through, yet none had been vetted, analyzed, or coordinated with the agencies responsible for execution. The National Economic Council director reportedly learned of the posts via a CNN notification. The Commerce Secretary was informed when a reporter called for comment. The trade team was blindsided. No one in the American economic policy machinery had advance warning because no planning existed. It was raw impulse, a man reacting to television, posting before his government was awake. At 8 a.m., Trump paused on the White House South Lawn before departing for an event and amplified everything on live television. He went further than the posts, naming 3 specific measures: potential restrictions on Canadian banks operating in the U.S., an immediate freeze on Canadian energy imports, and possible initiation of USMCA withdrawal. 3 explicit threats delivered live. None discussed with economic staff beforehand, none reviewed for legality, market impact, or consequences. One senior advisor was seen on the phone immediately, checking feasibility. Another appeared visibly distressed. Meanwhile, Canadian preparations were already underway. Here was the trap Trump built unknowingly. By making specific threats publicly and on camera, he committed himself irrevocably. Retracting them would signal weakness, something he never does. Implementing them would mean enacting unevaluated policies that, as Carney would soon demonstrate with devastating precision, would damage America far more severely than Canada. Before 9 a.m., he had created a lose-lose bind for himself, while the other side had not yet spoken. Markets opened at 9:30 a.m., nervous and volatile. Energy stocks swung. The Canadian dollar dipped initially as uncertainty fueled selling. Trump supporters cited the drop as proof the strategy worked. Experienced traders waited. The opening move shows aggression. The counter shows strategy. Markets price strategy. For 4.5 hours, the question was, how would Carney respond? Match aggression? Escalate? De-escalate? Back down? The answer changed perceptions of the entire conflict. For those 4.5 hours, Carney remained completely silent. No statement, no social media, no briefings, total quiet. Media speculated. Pundits wondered if he was caught off guard. Trump allies celebrated. Fox News ran a banner. Canada silent after Trump ultimatum. Commentators declared victory prematurely. One said, "This is what happens when a replacement drama teacher tries hardball with the leader of the free world." Confidence was total. Misreading was catastrophic. The silence was not hesitation, it was orchestration. Carney's team activated what had been built weeks earlier. Among several preloaded counter protocols developed through war games, this matched Scenario 3, public personal attack with uncoordinated economic threats. The playbook existed. Measures were drafted, allied statements pre-approved. The quiet period handled final coordination, legal verification, and timing, designed to land at 12:30 p.m. after fear was fully priced, but before close, maximizing reversal impact. At 12:30 p.m., Carney delivered a 15-minute address in Parliament, calm, data-heavy, sourced, the opposite of Trump's style. He dismantled each threat with precision. On banking restrictions, Canadian institutions hold $2.4 trillion globally, process over $600 billion cross-border annually. They are embedded in U.S. finance. Restrictions would disrupt American lending, mortgages, transactions far more than Canadian operations. We invite the president to consult his regulators before promises his system cannot survive. On energy freeze, U.S. imports 60% of crude from Canada. Freeze would raise gas prices by $1.40 a gallon in 30 days. He cited Goldman Sachs, IEA, Wood Mackenzie by name. Explain that arithmetic to consumers at the pump, perhaps during a photo op. On USMCA withdrawal, Requires 6 months' notice and congressional involvement per Article 34.6. Cannot be done by executive order or post. Review the agreement you signed. We can send a copy if needed. Each rebuttal calm, specific, lethal through facts, not volume. Simultaneously, Canada activated targeted countermeasures, not broad tariffs, but surgical strikes. First, immediate suspension of potash export support to Iowa, Nebraska, Kansas, Indiana, Missouri, Ohio. Canada supplies 30% global potash. Without it, corn yields drop 30–40%, soybeans unviable, timed for pre-planting, targeted Republican agricultural states whose senators would face instant pressure. Second, formal notice to pipeline operators prioritizing Pacific Atlantic commitments over U.S. flows, not a cutoff, paperwork signaling uncertainty, raising costs, consumer prices, political heat. Third, guidance to pension funds accelerating sovereign risk diversification, redirecting over $400 billion from U.S. markets to Europe, Asia, Commonwealth. Signal alone moves markets. These hit Trump's political base precisely, making his voters demand resolution, not retaliation, but strategy forcing the other side's people to act. Then the coalition. Within 90 minutes, 5 allies issued statements. UK, Canada's restraint contrasts with Washington's provocation. Japan, concern over unilateral threats among allies. EU, disputes should use dialogue, not ultimatums. Australia, reaffirms partnership, rules-based trade. South Korea, serious concern about unprovoked threats against allies. 5 statements, 90 minutes, all critical of US, supportive of Canada, impossible without pre-planning. Carney's team had pre-contacted leaders. When this happens, use this language, wait for signal. Signal given at 12:30, 5 governments ready. The provocation meant to isolate Canada, isolated America. 1 shouting alone versus 6 speaking calmly together. Trump thought he started a fight. He walked into an ambush. Once understood that Carney anticipated, pre-built everything, the day reads differently. Trump brought impulse posts. Carney brought 247-page threat assessments with rebuttals. Trump brought unvetted live threats. Carney brought vetted countermeasures. Trump brought anger. Carney brought allies and strategy. That asymmetry defines the conflict. Today it was visible in 12 hours. No spin could hide it. The banking threat, modeled weeks earlier, new $2.4 trillion, $600 billion figures, U.S. disruption points. Energy, supply models months old, 60% figure, price impact, analyst permissions secured, USMCA, 14-page analysis ready, Article 34.6 highlighted. This preparation happens when leadership takes the role seriously, anticipating building tools before crisis. It exposes the other side. Predictable threats mean reactive, not strategic. Reactive leaders in strategic conflicts lose. They just haven't accepted it. Warren Buffett's evening assessment at Berkshire Hathaway was devastatingly precise. In 70 years evaluating businesses and leaders, one truth stands. Preparation is the most reliable indicator of competence. When someone arrives with answers to unasked questions, confidence rises. When they improvise under pressure, nervousness follows. Because improvisation in high stakes usually signals unpreparedness. Unpreparedness always costs. The question is how much? He paused. Today, one leader improvised, another prepared. The outcome was predictable. Preparation wins in boardrooms, markets, international relations. He dissected. Trump issued 3 threats live, none vetted, 1 legally impossible. Carney countered with pre-built data, targeted measures, 5 allied statements in 90 minutes, weeks of work. 1 awoke, angry, and posted. The other planned for weeks. Markets priced the difference instantly. 1 risk, 1 asset. Risk costs more. Markets are honest judges. No politics, no loyalty. They assess competence. Today, they priced impulse versus preparation accordingly. Canadian dollar strengthened. Agricultural futures spiked in targeted states. Energy stocks fell. Financials softened. S&P declined on trade-sensitive sectors. After Carney's response, White House went silent. No follow-ups, no briefings, just quiet damage control assessing legality, market effects, agricultural fallout, how to retract without retreat. Morning loud, afternoon silent. In diplomacy, silence after provocation signals realization. Promises made cannot be kept without cost. Republican senators from targeted states called by mid-afternoon. Iowa urged dialogue on supply disruptions. Nebraska stressed fertilizer security. Ohio requested briefing. Kansas reportedly blunt. Farmers can't plant without fertilizer. Fix it or I go public. Targeting worked. Senators demanded White House repair damage, not support war, but fix constituent pain. Potash hit real seasons, yields, livelihoods, re-election districts. Internationally, the asymmetry was clear. Canada's sophisticated response versus American impulsiveness elevated Ottawa's standing, diminished Washington's credibility. Damage requiring years to repair. Every government watched a 12-hour leadership case study. One impulse and volume, one preparation and data. Obvious whom to trust for long-term agreements. Buffett's core warning: when the world's largest economy makes policy via impulse posts without review, credibility as a reliable partner erodes, not just with Canada, with everyone. Carney's preparation exposed absence of preparation. That exposure is permanent. Nations now know U.S. threats may lack backing. That knowledge changes global dealings permanently. Full picture. Trump awoke angry, posted 6 times, threatened 3 measures live without consultation, trapped himself, follow-through hurts America more, retreat looks weak. Carney dismantled with data, activated targeted measures hitting political base pre-planting, coordinated 5 allies in 90 minutes. Markets declared winner, senators demanded fixes. Buffett judged, 1 asset, 1 risk. Every government recalibrated U.S. reliability. This was never just tariffs or trade. It demonstrated impulse versus preparation. Trump's call-out aimed to show strength, exposed vulnerability. Carney's counter showed Canada anticipated, prepared, positioned better, not from size, but from treating governance as strategy, while the other treated it as platform. The trade war framed as power contest. Today revealed as competence contest. Competence won. Buffett. Preparation signals, impulse signals, markets read both. Today, Trump reached for his phone angry. Canada waited, data ready, measures calibrated, allies aligned, actions targeted. Impulse starts, preparation wins. Next time he reaches at 7 a.m., question isn't if Carney is ready. It's whether response is already built for that one too.